All right, thank you, everybody. First, before I begin, I'd just love to thank Philly Tech Week for what they do. It's such an important piece of the tech community here in the city and a real shining moment for Philadelphia itself. As Chris mentioned, my name is Jameel Farruk, and I am a failed entrepreneur. Yeah, that's just how it is. So how many of us in this room are an entrepreneur or a first-time entrepreneur? We get a show of hands. So quite a few of us. And how many people here are representing the venture community? All right, so one. Okay. You will be attacked after this meeting. I'm sorry. Well, what I hope to do is there's a lot of things that you can talk about that go awry during the process of building and growing a business. And in trying to think of all of those, being sort of the first presenter, I think you'll get a lot of that from the following presenters. So I want to talk a little bit more about the failures in characteristics of being an entrepreneur itself. We are all sort of gregarious and upwardly mobile and really aggressive personalities who want to achieve something, and sometimes that can work to our disadvantage. So I'd like to take that opportunity to sort of narrow it down to a few lessons, 3 in particular, about some of those characteristics that affected my ability to ultimately have my venture not succeed. So to set the framework a little bit, it's probably helpful for you to know who I am and what it is that I did. This is my co-founder at the time. His name is David Friedman. He's now the CTO over at Real Food Works. You'll hear Lucinda from Real Food Works speak later. David and I met together at our first venture. We were on the ground floor at a startup called Venmo. And right as that startup started to take off and go into great things, David and I decided to start our own gig together. And we formed this company called Inhabi. And Inhabi was a very simple premise. We wanted to look at the way renters and landlords connected a bit differently. And we built a platform that was somewhat of an eHarmony style service for renters and landlords. Our profit center came through the lead generation that we provided for landlords. Now, when we started the business, the housing market was in really bad shape, and that meant more people were losing homes they owned and moving into rental units. And those occupancy rates were at about a steady 89% across the country. And we felt that was a great opportunity for us to take these renters, provide a valuable service in a very cumbersome process, and capitalize on this space that we thought would work to our advantage. So the first thing that you have to think about is that was our grand vision. And sometimes the reality of the situation is a lot bigger than what your big vision may be. So this is kind of that first lesson. When we started again, those occupancy rates were at 89%, and the first mistake we made was building a product that didn't quite fit the market. So we pivoted quite early, and we were also self-funded, and we dropped probably about 80% of our operating cash in the first iteration of this project. So that led us to a place where now the market was exceedingly high in terms of occupancy rates, and that was affecting our supply and our demand. Too many renters, not enough open inventory, and that affected our profit center directly. So what really we had to come to this conclusion is that a lot of entrepreneurs have this fight till you die, and I'll ride the market out and I'll make it happen. This is what entrepreneurship is about. You're always holding sort of a pair of aces. And sometimes the smartest players will tell you that you have to let those aces go because there's a royal flush that's eventually going to happen out on the table and take you out. So that's really the tough decision, is not deciding to just start a venture and put your own money into it, but breaking up with your venture and saying no and walking away is a really tough part about it. And that'll lead me to the next part, is the runway. If you've funded your own venture, the runway is one of those things that's very tricky to deal with. It seems that it is a long enough distance for you to sort of propel off the ground and make things happen. If you don't take much outside funding and you are independently funding your business, I look at the runway more like a runway on an aircraft carrier. And this second lesson is that the biggest thing in an early stage startup comes down to mitigating risk. It comes down to validating assumptions and mitigating those risks that allow you to get to revenue positive and increase profitability. But it also means greatly mitigating risk for those who you're looking to seek venture capital from. And that's a game that you'll play with your business, and that's a game that you'll continuously play with yourself. How do you mitigate that risk so they will not only back you as entrepreneurs, but you've proven that you can responsibly grow this business? The big thing that you don't really think about is that runway. for yourself. You consistently push, you continuously stretch. And we got to a point where the hardest decision for us was not riding out the wave, but it was 18 months into it when we had a runway set for 16 months. And looking at ourselves and saying, we're just about ready to fly off this aircraft carrier and plummet into the ocean and lose our short homes and everything along with it. So the lesson is, your personal risk is something nobody is going to manage for you. Your business risk is something that you can work on together with your co-founder. Mitigating that risk for investment is something you can work on with outside capital. But your personal runway, you're the only person looking out for it. So think about the implications that means to yourself and also to your families. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial community in itself and sort of these folks that gain rock star status. Does anybody know Seth Godin? Nobody. Okay, we got a few. That's not bad, because I had no idea who Seth Godin was until I became an entrepreneur. I had no idea who David Cohen or Brad Feld or who any of these guys were. But I had the pleasure of meeting Seth Godin at an event in New York City when I was an early entrepreneur. And not only is he a fabulous entrepreneur and a great thought leader, but he's an incredible public speaker. I had to go right after him. But what I noticed is that in meeting him, I was fueled by this sort of upper echelon of entrepreneurs who were just pumping with thought leadership and motivational speaking and fueling to this vibe of an entrepreneur that nobody can touch me. I can achieve anything, and I'll go out there and I will just crush it. And this is his motto: make something happen. It's a very easy trap to fall into, and I'm not saying it's a bad one. You should always think positively, but it's also important for you to think realistically and be realistic with yourself. So as important as your local entrepreneurial communities are to you, as important as the thought leaders are there to help you think dynamically about your business, there are two people who absolutely changed my life, and it was right at the tail end of my business. And that's Bob Moore and Jake Stein, who run a wonderful company here called RJ Metrics. They, much like myself, started their company with 2 people, and several years later they have now employed 40 of some of the most brilliant and beautiful people here in Philadelphia, and they're doing great. What I really love about these guys, and sort of lesson number 3, is that I'd spent all this time idolizing entrepreneurs that I'd briefly met or that I followed on Twitter or read their blogs and inspired to this sort of icon they'd created in this little community for themselves, when really the most influential guys were right in my backyards. And I realized that the one thing was that these guys right here genuinely invested not in my company. They didn't give me any money. They barely introduced me to anybody. But what they really did was they genuinely invested in me. These were 2 guys that took a liking to me, took a mentorship standpoint with me, and literally wanted to see me succeed as an individual. And they gave me the best lesson that I've ever learned in entrepreneurship, and that comes down to this. All the decisions are really hard. When I started my company, I moved from 1,600 square feet to 252. I went from a 6-figure salary to 0. I invested every dollar that I had. I never went on a vacation. I never saw my family. I ate ramen noodles again after so many years of not wanting to eat it again. And I still thought there was so much left to prove. And these guys caught me at a very pivotal time in my life, and they told me pretty much the best advice that I could get is that I really had nothing else to prove except for one last thing. As an entrepreneur, the way I would set my legacy moving forward and set my future moving forward is, did I have the maturity to actually walk away from a business when it was the right thing to do? So they took a look at my business with me, they sat there, they coached me, and they were the ones that advised me to pull out. And that was the most honest and brutal information that I've ever found, and something that I'm eternally grateful for. So these guys are my idols, and that's it.